This is chapter 4, verse 95 of the Holy Quran. And its English translation is, the holders back from among the believers, not disabled by injury, and those who strive hard in Allah's way with their property and their persons are not equal. Allah has made the strivers with their property and their persons to excel the holders back a high degree. And to each Allah has promised good, and Allah has granted to the strivers above the holders back a mighty reward. I want to discuss this verse of the Holy Quran with you from a slightly different point of view, and that is, and I want to talk about people in general rather than just Muslims. From time immemorial, human beings have struggled for one thing. And what is that? And that is to establish the equality, dignity of the whole of humanity. We can go back hundreds of years and we can read in the American Declaration of Independence. And I hope someday someone will give a khutbah to show how closely that follows the teachings of the Holy Quran. Writing in that, Thomas Jefferson said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." Now you see, when God says, strive for something, strive to establish Islam, it is these wonderful principles of Islam that we should strive to establish. Abraham Lincoln, again in his Gettysburg Address, said at the end of the American Civil War, when a meeting was held to commemorate the victory, he said about Americans, "A new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal." And I recited to you a verse of the Holy Quran some weeks ago which said that there is no distinction in belonging to this family or this country or this clan or this brotherhood or this caste. These things exist only so that you may distinguish one person from another. Again, closer to our own times, Martin Luther King, in his now famous speech, said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skins, but the content of their character." And earlier than that, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, in his speech to the Pakistan Constituent Assembly, said something similar. He said that a day will come when there will be no Muslims in Pakistan. There will be no Hindus and there will be no Sikhs. And he said, what I'm not saying is that all religions will disappear, but what I'm saying is this, that people following all religions will be treated equally, and it will be, as Martin Luther said, the content of their character that will matter. And this brings us to Nelson Mandela, who passed away yesterday. I think it was in his book, The Long Walk to Freedom, that he said, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." And that is what humanity and human beings have striven for. I haven't gone into the examples of antiquity that that people may not be aware of or readily know of. So if we look at the character of these people, and if we look at the struggles that they went through, we can see that they were following this teaching of the Holy Quran. They weren't believers in the sense that they weren't Muslims. The holders back from among the believers not disabled by injury, and those who strive in Allah's way with their property and their persons are not equal. If you look at any of these situations, if you look at the American War for Independence, there would have been some who would have said, Britain is a mighty empire. I believe in American independence. I believe in what the king is doing is wrong. I believe that there should be no taxation without representation. But I will sit back. I will sit on the fence. I'll be neutral. And I'll see which side wins. Is he equal in character, in morals, in standing to the people who went out and fought for their ideal that human beings are equal? The monarch is not God's representative on earth. Nobility and lords and ladies are not superior to those who work in the fields or in the factories and other places. In the same way, when a group of people stood up and said it was wrong to enslave black people, and they fought for their freedom, they actually strove hard in Allah's way with their persons, with their lives, and with their property to achieve a certain end. You see, there's no point making fine declarations and fine words and so on, unless you are prepared to make selfless sacrifices to attain the noble objectives that you propound. Yeah, you can write a fine letter to the Times. You can make a great speech. But unless you're prepared to struggle from morning to night with all your capabilities and abilities and resources, you have not striven hard in Allah's way. And what Nelson Mandela said, for to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. That also goes back to the khutbah last week. You may free a man's body, but unless you free his soul, unless you free his mind, as the Holy Quran says, la ikraha fid din, there is no compulsion in religion. Unless you achieve that state, then you are not free. Your thinking is enslaved. And the unfortunate consequences of restricting and restraining and enslaving people's minds and their thinking is that whatever system tries that, it eventually collapses. Because those whose thinking is enslaved and restricted cannot argue and debate with those who are free to think. Many years ago, hundreds of years ago, there was an incident in which a great Greek philosopher, you all know his name, was offered a choice. That either you drink the poison chalice or you give up your beliefs. Now this story is well known, but what is not well known is why he was asked to do this. What were these ideas? What was this heresy that he was propagating? In those days, the usual belief was that the leader, there were city-states of the city, the king of the city would make a decision, and then whatever that decision, everyone would follow that. But Aristotle said no. Each individual has a conscience, and he can refuse to follow what his leaders are telling him if he considers it to be immoral. And he was offered the poison chalice and he took it and he died. No one knows that king's name. Everyone remembers Aristotle and how he stood up for this noble ideal and how he gave up his life for that. When I was in South Africa, if you drove from one area to another, it was obvious whether you were in a white area or in a black area or in Indian area, because of the conditions of the houses, of the streets, facilities that you saw available in there. And he struggled against that. And he struggled peacefully. But he gave up his life. He strove hard with his person and his property, as much as someone else who actually lays down his life. He was sent to prison away from his family for 27 years. 27 years he was away from his family. But he continued to struggle for the noble cause of equality of mankind. And all of these people, when you look at them, you see some traits which are common. The Holy Prophet Muhammad, of course, is in a different league altogether. But you can see there was selfless sacrifice and struggle for humanity, for freedom of man and dignity of man. He is offered the kingship of Makkah and he refuses. He is offered wealth and he refuses. He is offered the most beautiful women and he refuses. All the things that people of this world strive for, power, wealth, beautiful women, they're all offered to him and he refuses them for the sake of struggling and striving for this ideal. As Jefferson said, it's a self-evident truth that all men are created equal. Mother Teresa, what did she do? It was again selfless sacrifice. For a young woman to dedicate her life to looking after lepers in the dirty and filthy and run-down streets of Calcutta. She spent her life washing them. She spent her life feeding them. She spent her life looking after them. What did she gain out of it? What did the Holy Prophet Muhammad gain out of refusing these offers? I'm not saying Mother Teresa and the Holy Prophet Muhammad, those beloved, in the same league. But what I'm talking about is a common trait amongst all these people. And that is selfless sacrifice for the sake of humanity. There are many others. Take Mr. Jinnah, who created Pakistan. He was a successful barrister in London. He gave up his practice. He didn't get any salary. He didn't take any salary even when he became the Governor General of Pakistan. But he dedicated himself to protecting the interests of Muslims of the subcontinent. And you can go on and on and on. In our own Jamaat, there are many such examples. Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali, Khwaja Kamaluddin, Maulana Aziz Baksh, Maulana Abdul Haq Vidyarthi, Maulana Aftabuddin, and so the list goes on. These people, whether they're Muslims or not, they're acting upon this verse of the Holy Quran, and we can see, as the Holy Quran said, that those who hold back and sit at home, those who do not make these selfless sacrifices, they are not the same as those who actually give up their lives. Maulana Abdul Haq Vidyarthi gave up his family. He left a wife and small children and went on missionary tours and went as far as South America and North America. Why? To fight for a philosophy that establishes that all men are equal. That establishes that it is not money that is important. It is, in words of Martin Luther, the content of someone's character that is important. The greatness of Nelson Mandela lies in the fact that he never despaired. He never gave up hope. He never resorted to illegal means. He never resorted to violence. He kept on struggling against the tyranny that was rampant in his country. And he strove hard with his property. He was a lawyer. He could have earned a good living. There were few black lawyers in South Africa. He could have learned a very good living. He could have migrated from South Africa to England or the United States and been even richer. But he gave up all of that. He gave up all of that for what? For the sake of humanity. And he strove hard with his person that his own life was at stake. People wanted him killed. People overseas regarded him as a communist and a terrorist, and they wanted him hanged. But he didn't care. He had this idea in his head that all men are created equal. That black man and white man is the same. What matters is your ability, your capability, your moral character, not the color of your skin, not the number of notes in your wallet. And he strove for that. And this is why God made him great. We remember him. And for a long time, people will remember him. And for a long time, wherever lectures and khutbahs are given, from the pulpits of synagogues and mosques and churches, his name will be mentioned. And this is why I say to you always, the Holy Quran is not just for Muslims. It is for everyone. Whether you believe in God or not, whether you believe in the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or not, the teachings which are enshrined in it are universal. Everyone, if they act upon them, can benefit from them. And that is why it is so important that, as the Holy Prophet said, you should read the Holy Quran every day. Because if you read the Holy Quran every day, then when something happens somewhere in the world, it triggers your memory to a particular verse of the Holy Quran. Nelson Mandela is now a part of history. But wherever we see goodness and greatness, we should praise it, regardless of the man's nationality or his religion or the color of his skin. Wherever we see goodness, we should try and emulate that. Wherever we see badness, we should try and avoid that. And the greatest example of emulating goodness is when it is said that you should color yourself in God's colors, in words of the Holy Quran. When you're confronted by something, ask yourself, if I was on the other side, how would God treat me? How would I expect God to treat me? And do exactly the same thing. Let us hope that all of us learn from this example of Nelson Mandela. And I want to end this by a speech that Churchill made during the Second World War, about what the British people should be doing. He said, "Fight for freedom, arm yourselves, and be ye men of valor, and be in readiness for conflict. It is better to perish in battle than to look upon outrage upon our nation." And that is what we should do. That is how we should behave. Arming yourself doesn't necessarily mean buy guns. It also means arming yourself with knowledge. Bravery and valor doesn't necessarily mean that you go into the battlefield. It also means, like Socrates, that you stand up against a majority that's bent upon your destruction, and you say what you believe to be the right thing, rather than give in to the tyranny of the majority that is trying to cow you.